Fund balance is $6.1 million. The net OPEB pension liability unfunded is set at $4 million, and then anticipated payments for 30 years is the $11.9 million. And we do a study. We're required to do a study every 2 years, every other year being a table update. So we provide the census information to them, and they provide a table update, but it's not a full study that will be conducted next year. It'll happen the year after because we had a full study this year.
And the board deserves a ton of credit with this. 6 years ago, our liability was over $20 million. Our fund balance was not much at all. And then anticipated payments over 30 years was about $30 million. So I know it was not easy, and I know there were difficult decisions made along the way. At the same time, this cliff that we were seeing, I think we've been able to get through quite well. And I'm very optimistic that we'll be able to move forward without making more changes and be able to fully fund these benefits. And we are we're moving forward to the idea of pre-funding all of these post-employment benefits. That change was made years ago as well. So as more new staff members come on, all those benefits are pre-funded, which puts the district in a much better position.
And this is just a chart of our actual OPEB benefits paid and then projected. So you'll see the red bar through the 18-19 school year's actual, and then that blue line is the number of retirees. So you'll see if we look out into 2022, I don't know if you can see that, but 2022, 23, where there's that big drop, that is the projected total amount to be paid out that the OPEB study is showing on the 30-year actuarial. So this slide is showing the Community Service Fund tax levy history. This hasn't changed from the annual meeting. What we reported, the 2021 tax levy was set at $333,000, which includes that SRO position that we hired this year. And then, as I had mentioned earlier, we have a bunch of new grants that we're receiving this year. We have the ESSER grant, that's the Coronavirus Relief Act. We're receiving $482,931. We're anticipating spending that full allocation this year on salaries and benefits primarily, and then some supplies and such. We also have the Margaret A. Cargill grant, the AIM Foundation grant. That's a 3-year grant award for a total of $485,000. We also have received a DPI Transition Readiness grant, and that is to transition high school students to beyond high school. It's for students with an IEP, and that's a 1 year, that's this school year, for a total grant award of $40,250. And then we also received, we're in the second year of our DPI school-based mental health grant. That total award just for this year is $45,950. And then Michelle obtained a fresh fruits and vegetables grant. There's 2 parts to that. That total is $20,550. And then the Community Foundation of Dunn County just awarded us with a COVID-19 response grant for youth mental health in the amount of $5,850.
So that pretty much wraps up the informational part of the hearing. I want to thank Leah again for her work on this. I think there's a lot to be happy about and a lot to be proud of. I will say again that we really try to watch that tax rate and our overall levy closely. And I think we've done a really good job with that over the years. I feel a little bit bad about this year because I think there was a few things that came together in a bit of a perfect storm. you know, we already talked about the increased valuation and the value of people's property. The debt service, you know, the timing of that might not have been perfect, but with the rates the way they are, we talked about how much future interest expense that we were able to save our taxpayers by doing this. So, you know, it caused us to bite off a little bit this year, but the fact of the matter is it's going to save us, what was it, $1.75 million. And then if you look at the referendum in general, I think it was about $7 million less than what the voters approved in the referendum that we're able to come in at. So I know it's a bit more of an investment now, but I think in the long run it makes a lot of sense. I talked about the state aid being down, the vouchers going up, and then Fund 80 going up. So when you put all those things together, our rates still went down, which is pretty amazing if you look at it. But I realize the actual dollars for people, especially if their property went up, you know, may have gone up. So again, thank you, Leah, for doing that. And I guess at this time, is there any input or are there any questions about the budget?
Amy?
First of all, thank you, Leah. That was very well done. Very easy to understand for a layperson doesn't understand punching numbers as well. I do have a question about the vouchers. So $182,600, is that for those 22 students, or is that our whole total for the whole state? Because we have to give to the Parental Choice Program in Milwaukee too.
That is just our portion for the local school that's participating in this program. That does not include the Milwaukee School Choice.
So there's more than just that, if we're talking about that. And that comes right off the top of the general budget, correct?
That comes off of the general aid payment, correct?
Okay. Okay, so that's quite a bit, you know, that comes right out of our, I mean, that right there is probably 3, maybe 4 teachers. So just, you know, to kind of take care, to look at that. Also, it would be nice to know how much we do altogether pay for vouchers. I don't expect you to come up with this minute, but maybe in a future meeting or an email or something, you could let us know. I just be interested in knowing that. Thank you.
Chris?
This is and Leah, you're always awesome. Like, seriously. Putting those together, and then Readiness was great, and Joe, you was doing a great job of backing up information with pertinent things for us. The question I have for you,
Use the mic.
the question I have for you is, since there was a significant drop-off in students due to COVID, and I fear that some parents, not us, but some parents may be looking at WBS as a long-term alternative. I know we had mentioned in the fall about maybe thinking about doing some sort of in-house virtual to try to recoup some of those potential losses. And I was wondering, I know we didn't think about that for this semester, but is that something that's still the long-term plan for maybe rolling out in the fall of 2021?
Yes, in fact, you know, that's one of the topics of our administrative meetings, and we just talked about that more today. We already do offer the virtual option in our high school and in some cases in the middle school. We're anticipating that there may be families at the elementary age. So expanding our option down into elementary, not talking about before COVID, we were already offering that, but we weren't offering it K-12. You know, I think that's something that we'll want to continue to look at and try to look at the value and the flexibility it provides for families. So yes, I would anticipate that there will be some sort of virtual option moving forward.
Okay, any other questions? Flynn? Thanks again, Leah. I know Joel kind of touched on this a little bit, but we should be very thankful as a board, as a district, that our property valuations did go up. So we were able to hold the tax rate steady. Because I know I've taken a handful of questions as to why is my tax bill so much higher. So many times people don't necessarily look at that and pay attention, but the board has been fiscally responsible, in my opinion, on this. But it'd be a perfect storm if we would have raised that mill rate too, because that property valuation did go up significantly the last 2 years, as Leah pointed out.
I agree.
Any other questions? Jim and then Charlie.
So if the budget is really tight down at the state level, and it includes cuts into K-12 education rather than increases, can we make that up by increasing the
really depends on what the state statute says, you know, in terms of revenue limit. If our enrollment continues to stay low, the revenue cap will probably really limit what we're able to do. So it just really depends on what kind of legislation there is and what our enrollment does.
Okay, Charlie, can you remind me as to the scope of the Cargill grant?
Yeah, Brian's probably the one who can speak about that the best, but that's the grant that has allowed us to offer Art Integration Menomonie, or the AIM program. And Brian, do you want to say a couple words about it?
Sure. So that grant is part of our partnership with UW Stout. It's focused on integrating art-related activities into the core instructional program. Over the years, we've expanded. We started at the early childhood range, and then now we've worked on up into the high school, most recently involving our high school students in the community service class at the high school, some of the projects that they've been doing there. It's been a really good ongoing project. We've had it renewed now for the third consecutive time in multiple years at a time. So.
And it has three pillars, us, Stout, and then the community artists. And it's also focused on teacher retention, especially our early educators. So it's been a very successful program, and Brian has done a great job getting that renewed, and it just provides more for our students and staff here in Menomonie.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take one more question before we...
Oh, I just wanted to say I worked with, can't remember the grade, I think it was fourth grade, it was history. U.S. history for one of their projects, and they did a bunch of research and did a bunch of videos and stuff. And they're supplying a lot of props and things for the kids. It was actually a really cool program.
And some of you might have seen video clips or pictures of Chris Winter, you know, dressing up with the kids and providing really interactive and deep presentations. And yes, I agree. It's been a great program.
I know you said one more question, but can I just make a statement?
Yep.
I am not against school choice. I don't want people to think that I'm against school choice, but I am against money taken out of, especially for religious schools, because of the separation of church and state. And so, and there's other ways. Plus, those schools get a whole bunch more money than what the actual tuition is. So that's all.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the school district does get reimbursed for that money, but we do it through taxing. So it's not like the district is losing money on the deal, but the taxpayers end up having to pay more taxes as a result of it. Correct?
I think that's a fair way to say it.
Well, for the local, but for the state, we lose money.
I was talking 182,000.
Yeah, but the other aspect that we talked, that costs us money, a lot of it.
Okay, I think we're running out of time on the budget hearing. If that is all right, I think we'll take a motion to adjourn. Jim, is there a second? Clint? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. We'll take, should we take a minute break? 5? Is that? Okay, we'll take whatever we need here, I guess, a 3, 4, 5 minute break, and then we'll start a regular meeting. nothing further. I struggle from a point of the board being misled, in my opinion, as to what the original discussion of the guy was, and your synopsis or your, how you characterize that discussion. But, to bring it back on track, we do have a motion and a second on the table, on the floor, to remove those two agenda items. Chris?
Can I make a motion to modify that to?
You can make an amendment, please use the mic. You can make an.
I would like to make an amendment to remove F, discussion of policy 252.1 from Tanya's motion.
So we have an amendment, is there a second?
Second.
Amy? So the amended motion then would state that we would remove item 4G from the agenda tonight. Is that correct?
From my understanding, yes, if we move to.
That's your amended
Correct.
amendment to the motion. Joe?
So you'd be voting on the motion to remove G from the motion to modify the agenda, correct?
Or you could say it more simply and just say we would just be removing G from the agenda.
But you need to vote on the amendment before you vote on the motion.
Correct.
Well, the amendment was to take F out of Tanya's motion. So just that G would remain. That was the.
Correct.
So
You
that
sure?
is.
G, you want G or, which one? You sure you got the right one there?
Well, I do believe so. From what I understand from my motion is to remove G from Tanya's motion to be removed from the.
Oh, okay, got it.
And to keep F.
And that's what I seconded.
Okay, so the amendment to the motion then would be to remove the item 4G from Tanya's motion to remove item F and G from the main motion. So on the amendment to the motion, is there any more discussion?
So a vote of no would be,
A vote, right, the first thing we're going to vote on is Chris's amendment. So it would be, if you vote yes, then you're in favor of what Chris is asking for, which is to remove item G from Tanya's main motion. If you vote no, that means that you want to leave F and G both for Tanya's main motion as is on the agenda item, or to, back to her main motion to remove them from the agenda. So a no vote would to leave Tanya's motion intact. A yes vote would be to affirm Chris's amendment to the motion to remove item G only. G only?
From Tanya's motion.
From Tanya's motion.
Yeah,
not
that's
from
correct.
mine. Okay. Any further discussion? Is everybody clear on that?
Yes means you follow Tanya, no means you go with Cliff. Or
No.
am I
No.
backwards?
You're backwards.
I'm backwards, all right.
A yes vote would be to support
Okay,
Chris's
sorry.
motion.
I apologize.
A no vote would be to leave Tanya's motion intact.
All right.
Any more discussion or questions? Jamie, let's vote.
Poor Jamie's still right.
If you'd rather do this one by voice.
Penny Versta,
No.
Chris Freeman,
Yes.
Tanya Hughesby. No. Clint Moses,
Yes.
Amy Mills Thompson,
yes.
Charlie Schneider,
Yes.
Dave Steyer,
No.
Jim Swanson,
Yes.
5-3.
Okay, motion carries 5-3, the amendment to the motion. Now to the main motion. The main motion now states, we would like the agenda to proceed with the removal of item 4G from the agenda. Any discussion? Okay, let's vote on the main motion. If you vote yes, then you want the agenda to be the same except to remove item 4G, discuss proposal for third-party mediation. If you vote no, then you want to leave the discussion for third-party mediation on the agenda. Correct?
We're going to start with Chris this time.
Yes.
Tanya? Yes. Clint?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I apologize.
That's okay.
8-0.
8-0.
Motion carries 8-0. So that is our agenda moving forward. Any further questions on the agenda? Okay, moving on to item 1E, rules of order for board discussions. And just as a brief preview, I had asked, or mentioned this at our last meeting, that I was going to put something on the agenda this time on how we contact, or how we conduct our discussions at board meetings. And hopefully you all had a chance to read the attached article in here. I thought it was some good information about how much time should be allotted to board members to speak, the order that they speak, those sorts of things. And so I was hoping as a group that we could decide on how we wanted to move forward, not only from a board, how our board operates and functions, but also from the public viewing our meetings to make it a little more easier to follow and timely in that regard. So, are there any, I guess, Jim?
Okay, I guess I got a logistics question. Who's going to read the timer?
I'll do the timing.
And then the other question is 2 minutes enough time?
That's what I want to talk about.
Okay.
So, to me, in my opinion, Jim, it's between 2 and 3 minutes.
That's kind of what I was thinking too, actually, so.
Any other timing?
Yeah, I just, the article says that too, that also if you plan for meetings properly and prepare, that there shouldn't be more than 4 minutes to have to speak to our topic, so.
Yep. One of the things I thought about 3 minutes is for community communications, we allow 3 minutes for the public to come in and speak, and so if we hold them to that standard, I think that's fair for board members to be held to the same standard. So. And the reason for the 2 times speaking is, you know, if you read through the article, a lot of times, one person can make their point, they'll have 3 minutes to do that. All the rest of the board members would have a chance to speak before that person would be allowed to speak again. And then that person would have a chance to speak again for a 3-minute time period. That way, all viewpoints are heard that way. And one of the things they talked about is too, is people that tend not to speak as much at meetings, you know, try to involve them in the discussions as well. So it's not lopsided as far as the board. Amy.
As president, I would really like to see, I like the idea of making sure everybody has a chance because people are quiet. And so if you could keep track, I think that'd be great, so that you could, so that, you know, when obviously keep track of the 3 minutes and then also of the twice for one thing after everybody, they can do the second time after everybody's gone. I think if you can make sure that everybody has a chance to go, and there may be somebody that may not want to say anything, they might want to just pass. But I still think it's important to maybe even just call their name and let them ask.
Yep, and I will try to do that, I really will. And if I slip up on that from time to time, don't be afraid to remind me either.
Well, it's new, it'll take a while.
Chris?
I think that there's some problems in changing the way in which that we've always kind of conducted business. And I think you really should think carefully about how you change the way in which that our meetings work, because we've always operated according to a very relaxed version of Robert's Rules of Order. And to start adapting some more disciplined ways in which we create controls and give power over speaking to certain individuals, that really changes the kind of sense of goodwill that we've had in our meetings. Now, I will personally state that I believe that the reason why we're having this time limit is because sometimes I speak too much. I don't believe there's anybody else on this board that has had a problem with going on too long or raising their voice too many times. Rather than making a change in the way in which I think that when I responded to this last week, I certainly can limit myself to the amount of words that I give to a subject. So if that's the question at hand, and if we have had a good engagement of a relaxed version of Robert's Rules of Orders, rather than adopting new formal frameworks and putting that decision as to when and how people can speak into one person's hands, I would be happy to say that all you have to do is ask. There's no other evidence that anybody else is going on too long. And I believe this particular article references 45-minute discussions over purchasing of a computer. To use this article, which is geared towards lawyers and lawyerly discussion, and apply that to a very congenial and friendly board, seems to be a mistake.
The one thing I will say first, Charlie, I did contact Bob Butler. I called Bob. This is what he sent me. This is his recommendation for school boards, was what came out of this lawyers' conference. So it came directly from WASB, from Bob Butler, as far as his recommendation. Charlie?
I guess I would say, although I agree that a few people have gone on longer than others, I think one thing that we're all guilty of is getting that next comment in over and over and over again and prolonging the debate. So I think that the limit of speaking twice about the subject makes a lot of sense. Just if you can't say it the first 3 minutes, then maybe it shouldn't be said at all. So I'm in favor of the 3 minutes and limiting the number of times to speak.
I remember, Chris, and this isn't to pick on you, but it's just an illustration. I remember going to the very first candidate forum. And you remember when you first ran for the board, you and I were both on. And the year before, actually. And when you got done with your 3 minutes, or whatever, you were a little bit in disbelief, and the timekeeper's like, it can't be 3 minutes. But I'm just saying, as a teacher, you're very relaxed talking in front of groups and making your viewpoint known and that. And so I just think from a format of how the discussion is held, I would like to entertain a motion from the board that we adopt 3-minute discussion time per board member twice on any given subject, and then I think I guess I'll just leave it at that.
I'll second.
I'm asking for a motion.
Oh, I'll make a motion.
Tanya, is there a second?
I'll second.
Kenny, discussion, Chris?
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with making a motion from this particular part of the meeting. Is this making a motion for you to write up an illustration of what this might look like? Or are you saying we're voting on this general comment that hasn't been put into a specific framework yet?
Procedural motions that deal with how the meeting is structured can be done during the meeting. There's no necessity to bring that up on the agenda. I did it as a goodwill gesture, if you want to call it, or formality for the board. But actually, it can be pulled from the floor at any time if somebody wants to change how we do our discussion or whatever. It's a procedural thing that the board can take. So, Chris?
No, what I would say is I just would like to see what that looks like in written form before we vote on what it is that we're actually adding. I get the idea of it, but I would like to see specifically what that's going to look like.
The motion that I asked was for that the individual board member may speak up to 2 times and up to 3 minutes per time on any individual motion or discussion item.
I was going to say, you mean motion or you mean item and agenda item?
Agenda item, thank you. Agenda item, otherwise you don't cover the... Chris?
Could we make an amendment that a member could petition to ask a request to speak a 3rd time, and that be at the discretion of the board president?
I would Menomonie make the motion?
Friendly amendment.
Charlie, who made the second? Charlie? Okay.
I'm kind of with it.
Chris,
So I guess I'm making a motion to amend it to.
they both
Yeah,
agreed,
friendly.
the friendly amendments,
Sounds good? All right, sounds great.
if that's okay with the board. And one of the main things in going through some of the Robert's Rules stuff is that the will of the board is done, is the main thing. That we do the will of the board, so that any one board member, whether it be the president or anybody else, isn't doing something that the rest of the board doesn't agree with or doesn't condone, so. So we have a motion on the table to limit speaking time to 3 minutes and up to 2 times on any agenda item. A person may petition the board in whole for a 3rd time, and that discretion will be left at the will of the board, if the board will allow it. So,
When does this take effect?
as soon as we
Tonight? Right now?
So, that means that I've seen the president has been the timekeeper on it. I didn't. And also I'll keep track of who, write down who talks and that kind of stuff. But I will say right now, I'm not perfect, so if I make a mistake, don't be afraid to let me know.
We will.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other discussion?
I just have one question about context for this. When you make these additions to our agenda, do these additions have to follow the same rules as other additions to the agenda? Like there has to be a written request, and then there has to be a context written for it, and there has to be a policy reference to it to give us background to understand what the discussion is going to be? Or is this a particular part of adding items to the agenda that doesn't have to follow those normal rules that we would adopt?
The meeting discussion stuff is a procedural motion that really doesn't require an agenda item at all. So, quite frankly, it didn't even have to be on the agenda. Our board could bring it up at any time on how we want to conduct the business. I just wanted to have it on the agenda so that we could, people could think about it, get that article out there that you could look at a little bit. And I did have a little context in there, and I talked about it at our last meeting as well.
Since I get a second time to talk, I want to mention, actually, couldn't the board president just adopt this, or is this something the board would have to vote on, Dave?
Joe, I'm not sure.
I think the board president could adopt it, subject to objection from the board. Just like if the board president or the chair of the meeting makes a different ruling, it's always subject to the discretion of the majority of the board. I shouldn't say always, most of the time.
Chris?
All right, last question. Does this affect questions that we ask? I know I know in the article it specifically referenced speeches, and that means that you're arguing for a particular position in legalese. There's oftentimes where we have to ask clarifying questions that should not be part of how we are determining who speaks and for how long. So could I make an amendment? I would like to make an amendment to remove clarifying questions from those rules of discussion.
We have an amendment. Is there a second? Jim?
Unless you can leave that at your discretion, I don't know.
The only problem I see is that I think the more we dilute this and go down, the harder it's going to be to enforce. We have a motion and is that a second, Jim, or?
It's a toss-up, but yeah, why not? We'll second it.
Motion and a second, an amendment on the floor. Any discussion on the amendment?
If we don't adopt this,
Chris?
if we don't adopt this amendment, that means that when we have incredibly complex topics of discussion that usually only Joe can answer, that we're limited to the amount of information that we can have for making decisions, and it's fraught with error to limit our ability to question. And questioning is not a way of redirecting the conversation, but clarifying questions are necessary to give us the information that we need, and also for the people that are watching the meetings as well, so they're informed on specific aspects of the discussion that merit further explanation.
One thing I will say is that by allowing the option to ask additional questions, to speak a third time, if necessary, with the board of 9. I think we do give, it's up to 27 questions, depending on how the board does it. Charlie?
The board can suspend these rules at any time by vote of the board. So if we're into a complex subject, we could ask permission, if you will, of the board to suspend this particular rule, as we can with most of the other rules. So I get your point, Chris, but I think it'd be better to ask to suspend when we get into that very complex issue, rather than to just carte blanche. We can ask any questions that we want to ask whenever we want to ask them.
A motion to suspend the rules requires a second, no debate, no amendments, and it's a 2/3 vote. So if you get into that situation and 2/3 of the board wants to keep asking questions, what Charlie said could be done to prolong the debate. Penny?
Well, and quite honestly, typically we are provided with a lot of information ahead of time and the ability to ask questions prior to the meeting to hopefully have those answered. Yes, things come up, things change very quickly, especially in the days of COVID, but I think that if we are prepared for the meetings like we are expected to be, those questions should already be answered, and it shouldn't have to be in the board format.
Okay, we have an amendment on the floor to allow extra, how did you state your amendment, Chris?
Wasn't there like, I don't know exactly, I think Tony probably
The
knows.
ability to ask clarifying questions.
No, to ask clarify, I thought we were back on the First Amendment, but we're on the Second Amendment. So my amendment was to allow clarifying questions that are separate consideration from the numbers of times that members get to speak.
Okay, we have an amendment on the floor. I'm going to second. Is there any other debate or questions on that? Chris?
Just one further comment, and that's when we first got on this board, or when I first got on this board, we didn't have a lot of discussion. And I think that it's important to remember that how that has evolved may have had some effect that, have gone on too long, but we should all remember that we're in the midst of COVID, and that a number of other school boards have had incredibly long meetings, and they've been very divisive, and nobody else has moved to limit discussion the way that you are right now.
I'm not trying to limit discussion. I'm trying to make it more productive for the board.
That's your view of it, and that's okay, and I know that you're entitled to that. I just have a different view of that.
Any other discussion on this amendment? Okay, a yes vote on the amendment would be to add an amendment to the main motion to add clarifying questions, that they wouldn't be subject to the timeline or the number of times that they could be asked. Okay? That's the amendment that's on the table. A yes vote would be to add that on. A no vote would be to leave it as is, without the clarifying question.
And I apologize, here's a question to the amendment. A question is a question. A question with backup comments and commentary is very different. A question of what is the number of COVID cases in the district this week is very different than how do you feel about COVID in our district? And then going on with a run-on commentary, and how could that potentially be? I don't disagree with Chris in the respect that questions deserve to be answered. But again, I'm going to go back to, you should have asked the questions before the meeting. But when things do come up, how will that be handled? Will you, or whomever the president is, or the rest of the board have the opportunity to stop the person who is questioning, quote unquote, and shut it down? Or will it just keep going on and on and on into a short question and commentary?
I guess
Like I just did.
personally, I wouldn't be opposed to a clarifying question, but I would be opposed to a clarifying question with a lot of reasoning behind it, pushing their position.
I
Amy?
think a clarifying question is like just a little bit ago when I said, what was that motion? So I could get it before I decided what was that. That's what I think is a clarifying question. Example.
Because I'm all for, good question and debate. I take issue with Chris's point that there was not good debate before you got on the board, because I remember a lot of good debates we had on the board.
Oh, they were spicy, that's for sure.
I apologize for opening that can of worms. What are we voting on?
Chris?
Can I just state that that's exactly what I mean by clarifying questions, questions without commentary? And it would be nice if we could break this up before we vote over the final deal, but it's fine if we don't. We should be able to, someone should be able to make a statement, and one clean statement, what it is that we're actually doing right now. So I would affirm with Penny that that's exactly what I meant by clarifying question. I don't believe it's questions with commentary, and that's what the motion is that we're voting on right now.
Jamie, do you have the amendment handy?
I can ask a clarifying question. So this is to, the motion is
The main motion was to allow each individual board member
3 minutes.
3 minutes, 2 times each to speak on an agenda item.
Right.
The amendment that Chris made was the ability to ask a clarifying question,
Yes.
which if that's what it is, I'm not opposed to that. Chris?
There was another amendment that was that we have a friendly ability to petition to make another commentary beyond the two. That was my first amendment. And then the second amendment was to ask the clarifying questions to
Correct.
that. So those,
Yeah.
what we're voting on.
Yeah, a friendly amendment to the first motion was to have the ability to ask a third question.
Or a third comment. And then the second one was to make
Third
a
comment,
clarifying question. But those are rare and at the pleasure of the board.
A third comment at the discretion of the board. So then the original motion would now read, thank you, would read an individual board member may ask up to, or may make up to 2 comments, up to 3 minutes each, with the ability to have a third comment period at the will of the board on any individual board item, agenda item. The amendment to that then would be to allow a clarifying question to be asked by individual board members. Any other questions on that? So if you vote yes, you are voting in favor of the ability to add a clarifying question to that motion. We'll vote on the amendment first, if there's no further discussion. Jamie?
Sure. Okay.
Yes would be to add the clarifying question to the main motion. No would be to not add.
All right. We're going to start with Tanya.
Yes.
Clint?
No.
Amy?
Yes.
Charlie?
No.
David?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Penny?
No.
Chris?
Yes.
5-4.
4.
No, I'm sorry, 4-4. There's only
The
8 of us.
amendment fails, correct?
The tie, it fails.
Hmm?
The tie fails.
Okay, back to the main motion then. It would allow up to 2 minutes, or 2 times, 3 minutes each per individual board member, with the option of asking a third question at the will, third comment, I'm sorry, at the will of the board. Any discussion on that, on the main motion?
Just clarification, clarifying question. At the will of the board would actually be to petition, right? So we'd have to, the board would have to vote in order to allow a member to speak a third time.
I guess the way I'd like to handle it, Clint, is if that, so-and-so Chris would like to have an additional 3 minutes to comment. Is the board in favor of that? Maybe raise your hands or not. I'd like to make it simple.
We don't have to go through like a roll call vote.
I'd rather not.
You could do it through informed consent, the chair could say, unless someone objects, I'll now issue Chris a third. time to speak.
The one problem where I get into, where I would object is if it's becoming repetitive and some of the same things are being said, and I don't feel it's productive, or it's not gonna influence anybody's opinion, or change anybody's mind, or give them more information on that. Chris?
The only question I had, and I probably just old man, I'm probably just an old man, I can't hear very well, but I thought I heard Tanya say yes and I couldn't say no.
I thought I did too.
So then when I count that up, then I get a different count than you got.
It should be, because you said yes as well.
Yeah.
Who voted yes on the motion to add, yeah? One,
Last
two?
motion?
Yeah. So that would have been 5-3.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. In my head, I thought it was 4-4, so my apologies. I should have called it. It's a little different when we were missing one board member. So then the clarifying question is back on the agenda item. So we're back on the main motion. Now we'll vote on the main motion. 2 times you can speak, up to 3 minutes. You can petition for a 3rd time at the discretion of the board president. If that's okay, wording it that way. And then you can have clarified questions may be asked, but only clarifying questions, not statements or comments. And just so everybody knows, this is something we can change at any time. If it's not working, or we get into next meeting and say, oh, that was a train wreck, or that went really well, we can change it. It's not rocket science. So, despite us going through a lot of hurdles on this. Any more discussion? Okay, let's vote.
Sam, we're going to start with Clint,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Penny,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Tanya,
Yeah.
8-0.
Motion passes 8-0. Thank you. Item 1F, we have no recommendations, accommodations. Item 1G, student rep communications. So, we are privileged to have Mesa, right?
Yes.
Here with us today.
Yes. So for sports and activities at the high school, the dance team has been approved for contact kick and will be choreographing their kick dance in the near future. Their first competition will be at River Falls on the 16th of January, in which they will be performing their pom dance. It has been a great season so far for them, and they can't wait to see what the rest of their season brings. The boys swim team had a very successful meet on Tuesday against Superior. They defeated Superior 97-66 and took first place finishes in almost every event, including Dylan Norby in diving, Cody Kasmerick in the 200 free, and Kevin Leach in the 500 free. The boys and girls cross country team were awarded for being outstanding students, with both teams earning Team Academic All-State awards. To qualify for the award, the team has to compete at the state meet and have an average GPA of 3.5 or higher for the top 5 GPAs. The girls have the 4th highest GPA of the D1 state teams with an average of 3.95, while the boys top the list with a 3.99 average, which was actually the highest boys average in not only the D1, but all divisions. Also, Adam Topper was named the Cross Country District 3 Boys Coach of the Year by the Wisconsin Cross Country Coaches Association. And this is his 3rd time winning that award over the past 17 years. For boys basketball, the JV2 boys basketball team has been quarantined, unfortunately, until this Tuesday, but they are excited to start their season back up again. The musical for this year is Schoolhouse Rock Live, and the cast is working hard on memorizing their lines, music, and choreography with virtual lessons. Performances are February 26th, 27th, 28th, and March 4th, 5th, and 6th in virtual formatting. For information about the musical, you can visit the musical page on the high school website. DECA started their competition season, and the district conference, which is normally held at UW Stout, has been moved to a virtual setting for the safety of our competitors. Students are doing online testing and creating role-play videos throughout the week, which was last week. And then DECA has also partnered with Make-A-Wish Foundation and Macy's. By sending letters to Santa, Menomonie DECA has raised $105 for Make-A-Wish Foundation during the holiday season. And the Menomonie DECA chapter president, Chloe Ayler, was selected by Wisconsin DECA as the member of the month in the state for her continued leadership in DECA and involvement in leadership council throughout the state. So congrats, Chloe. And then in school, it seems many students have had a good holiday break and we had a good week back to school. From what I've heard, many classes are moving at a very high pace with the new block schedule to stay on pace for the semester, and students are beginning to prepare for our final exams. And then the preview night for 8th graders will be completely virtual this year, but our teachers are working hard to create some excellent videos for those students. Thank you.
Excellent.
Any questions?
Congrats to the track team, that's pretty impressive.
Cross country, but thank you.
Cross country, sorry. That's me, to have the GPA.
I was just thinking, look how much information she got in a short period of time. She got much more out than half over.
Less than 3 minutes, no clarifying.
You can talk together if you want, too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Okay, moving on to communications, I have none. Okay. Board member superintendent communications, any board members? Amy?
I can't remember if I said anything about this last meeting, but I thought the concerts from the middle school and the bands was excellent. The virtual, how they did that, and how they were separated, and how they had little holes in their masks, and how that was all done was just outstanding. I was just really pleased with that.
Thank you, very nice. Anybody else? Penny?
It's included under administrative content, but the public can't see that. But I would like to congratulate Heather Kleinerman, who is a former board member, which I'm sure, sorry, Joe, I don't mean to steal you.
No, it's great, please do.
But with her appointment to the State Superintendent Parent Advisory Council, she was a very passionate board member, loved her position, and I'm so happy to see that she is still involved in education and working to make our schools better.
Good for Heather. Very nice, thank you. Any other board members? Joe?
Okay, just a few things. First of all, the State Education Convention is coming up. The link is in there for board members. If you would like to be registered for that virtual conference this year, please let Jamie know. There is registration required. It is a very good convention, and there's a lot of good speakers. There's two things I wanted to mention tonight, and first of all, it was brought to my attention that some people were concerned with an idiom that I used during the December school board meeting. As part of a discussion about the attributes of great teachers, I said that great teachers know what students need, whether it be a pat on the back or a kick in the shorts. My reference was intended to illustrate how the best teachers are able to provide both sensitive support to students, but also successfully motivating them to do their best. Some people likened my use of the idiom as a reference to the use of corporal punishment, but that was not what I intended in the meaning of what I said. I tried to provide clarification for my statement while it was being shared on social media, but that attempt was unsuccessful and brought more unsought attention to this issue. Regardless, I want to make it very clear that neither the school district nor I support the use of corporal punishment. I apologize to anyone who interpreted my use of this idiom as promoting corporal punishment in any manner, and I appreciate this being pointed out to me. I definitely plan to be more careful with my use of idioms in the future. Secondly, last month the High School Student Council conducted a survey to gauge student perceptions about reopening Menomonie High School for in-person instruction. In my communication to families, I mentioned the survey results that were shared with me, as well as some of my concerns about the limitations of the survey. I also shared some statistics for how many students actually completed the survey. While I did not intend to make any statistical generalizations from the survey results, after reviewing my message, I can see how interpreting the information in that manner could cause significant concern. I agree that it would be statistically incorrect to generalize the survey results in a manner which assumes that the students who did not respond to the survey would have all selected a certain response. I appreciate those who have been so engaged with my communications and thank them for pointing this out to me. I apologize to anyone who felt like my communication about reopening Menomonie High School misrepresented the students' survey data. And moving forward, I plan to be more careful with how survey results are reported in the district. To that end, I am very happy to announce that faculty in the Applied Social Science program at UW-Stout have volunteered their assistance with future surveys in the school district of the Menomonie area. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Moving on, item J, revenue and expense reports for the month ending in December 2020. Leah.
Okay, if you'd like to open up the revenue report, we'll take a look at that one first. So in looking at the general fund 10 revenues for the month of December, we received in $3,997,330.10. In Fund 21, our gift donation fund, which also includes the Margaret A. Cargill Foundation grant, that we received $226,498.34. And then in Fund 27, we received it in $403,965.47. Those totals include our equalization aid payment, second special education aid payment, and then several grants and other local revenues. The next report is the expense by function report, if you'd like to open that up. We'll take a look at the general fund 10 expenditures first, the percentages. This year we're at 33.30% compared to 31.97%. So those are up slightly from last year as anticipated. Fund 27 special education is at 34.97% compared to 35.05%. And then Fund 50, we're at 38.57 compared to 38.86. So that one is real close to what it was the prior year. And then if we look at our expense by object report, this report is for all the funds, not just general fund, but all funds. Year to date, or through December, we're at 43.97% compared to 31.74%. The big jump for this year includes that service refinancing. So that's why you see a little bit of more of an increase for the month of December.
Okay.
Any
Any questions?
Quick question, sorry, I meant to go back to that, the second expense one, and just was curious, and I'm sure it's just timing. Insurance seemed to be much lower than previous, and then I was curious what other non-program transactions were. If you could just give me an example of it.
Sure. So the debt service, that it is down slightly this year. Or I'm sorry, did you say insurance?
The insurance, yep, that 2,700, that middle line there. No, I always look at the percentages and compare for each column, and it looks like that one has the biggest difference, and I assume
Right.
timing.
We increased our unemployment estimate, and so far the expenses have not been as high as we anticipated, so it's down a little bit.
Okay. And then can you just share, what's an example of the other non-program transactions?
That would be like your tax levy credits from prior years, stuff like that.
Those are my two. Thank you.
Any other questions? Charlie?
Fund 50 is substantially higher, and I think I understand that process, but that'll get reimbursed at the end of the year, so it'll be whole, is that true?
Right, so are you looking at the 81.12%?
Correct.
Yeah, that includes encumbrances, so that includes purchase orders for, at the start of the year, Michelle will put in a purchase order for all the food, all the, and so it looks like a greater share, but that's just encumbered waiting to be spent.
But even our encumbered is much higher than the other comparison years. Those would have included encumbrances at that point as well, right?
Well, that's just year to date, so no.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Leah. Move on to the monthly employment report. Any questions on that? Jim?
I just see there's a lot of resignations and only 2 hires. Is that like an ongoing process right now to replace the people that resigned?
Yes, and that's pretty typical, especially when we get towards the end of the calendar year. It's not, or I should say, it's not atypical to see some resignations. But yeah, Sam and her team are busy working on filling any vacancies that we have.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, moving on to the action agenda, we'll start with the consent agenda. Action to approve the consent agenda. Do we have a motion? Penny, is there a second? Clint? Any discussion? This action item includes minutes from the December 14th board meeting, financial reports, general fund checks in the amount of 1.99228 or $1,992,867.89 and cash receipts in the amount of $68,690.74 for the month of December 2020. Donations including exceeding $1,000 or $1,500 to the elementary libraries for organization bins from the Community Foundation of Duncan. That was a $1,500 donation from the Community Foundation. Okay, if there's no more questions, Jamie? Motion carries 8-0. Moving on to item 3A, the action item. Action to approve the number of regular and special education spaces available for open enrollment. Do I have a motion to approve? Jim? Is there a second? Amy? This was something that we did talk about last week.
Yep, Tony covered it and went through the report last month. Nothing's changed. Tony, nothing's changed, correct?
Okay. Any other discussion on this item? Okay, Jamie, let's go. Motion passes 8-0. Item 3B, action to approve the 2021 budget revisions. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Amy, is there a second? Charlie? We talked about these last meeting as well, last month. Anything else, Joe?
Lee, any changes from what was presented last month?
Yep, they're highlighted in yellow on the report. There were quite a bit of changes, mainly due to a lot of the grants. And then, Tanya, you'll see under 490,000, it's that Wisconsin Department of Approved Tax Chargebacks. There was a large increase this year in that account.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Leah. Okay, James, let's go. Motion passes 8-0.
Leah, you're welcome to stay, but we're through the financial portion. You're welcome to go whenever you'd like to. Thank you.
Okay, discussion items. We'll start with review Exhibit 165, board member norms and operating procedures. I had asked this to be placed on the agenda, and so I don't know if the board wants this read out loud or to go through it at all. Do you have any preferences, Tanya?
I had a question. Some of the past policies we have listed, like the originator or the writer, can you just give maybe Charlie and I a background of like when this was created and perhaps who the writers were, just to set the stage or have an idea?
Adopted in July of 2019, I believe. Chris? Jim? And Heather? Chris?
David part of that too, also?
I'm not sure if Dan...
Dan Paulson was there. Kleiderman did most of the work on the writing. We had a healthy discussion, and Jim, am I correct in that Heather did the bulk of the writing?
Yeah, she
She did a
followed.
great job.
Yeah, she grabbed some stuff
Sorry.
off of, I think, Ashland School District or someplace like that up north. From what they had already written, we adapted it for here. Two.
some of the things on the board norm, I'm sorry, Amy?
What a procedural question again. You asked for this to be on the agenda, and again, for procedural, I know you said that you didn't have to do this, but it seems to me that you didn't follow the new policy that we came up with about what your point is about, like, you know, information and why you want to do it, sort of thing. I just think that if we're going to have a policy, we need to all follow it.
Point will take.
Should we table it for next meeting then, Dave? And then you can just write up your email as to why we should be good stewards and review the board norms, so we follow policy. Okay,
Motion?
that's my, a motion, sure.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second to table till our next meeting. Any discussion? Oh, is there discussion on the table motion?
No.
All those in favor?
Oh, I just have a comment on that.
No discussion on the table motion.
There isn't? No.
Jamie, take the vote.
Penny,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Tanya,
Yes.
Clint,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
Okay, motion is tabled to our next meeting. Discussion item 4B, COVID-19 report. Joe?
Okay, I'll try to be brief. I talked to KT Gallagher today, and things are looking much better in our county. And, you know, it's nice to be optimistic, but I want to make it very clear, it's way too early for people to go back to what we consider to be normal. It's still super important to wash up, back up, and mask up. But you can see the numbers in Dunn County, the active cases have dropped significantly. The hospitalizations went from a high of 27 on November 18th down to 2 people today. Still very serious, but nowhere near the situation we were in November. When you look at the data for our school district, the most recent COVID report is out, plus I updated some stuff for board members today. There has been 160 confirmed student cases cumulative for the entire year. 6 probable student cases, which we only had a couple probable student cases the entire year, but I think over the holiday break, you know, some people probably came down with symptoms and just felt like it wasn't necessary to get tested or something, but we have 6 probable cases. The good news is the student cases right now, 10 are active. Most of those were all quarantined prior to the startup of school after winter break. There are 2 active staff cases, so most cases have been recovered. In terms of student and staff attendance, you can see that our exclusion numbers are much better than what they had been. The student exclusions today 3.93%, and then staffing 1.97%. So that's very good. DW Stout has canceled their spring break for this spring. At this point, there's no plans to modify the school district calendar in the SDMA. Second semester options, January 25th will be the beginning of the second semester K-8. The high school has pushed back finals. If you recall, the end of the first term finals was pushed back due to the network outage and the COVID situation. So second semester in the high school will start January 29th. I know that the principals and Brian and his team are working together to make sure there's a smooth transition. The enrollment window for second semester fully online, that window was closed in December. 377 students are registered for the virtual option for second semester. That's down from 442 students in the first semester. Student activities, you know, I know, Jim, I know this is something you had asked and make sure we report on each meeting, and it's something we do, but the winter sports and activities at the high school and middle school are going well. The athletic director and building principals continue to prioritize good communication and compliance checks. We have 12 teams participating at the high school in the various sports. 3 of those teams have gone through temporary pauses to address issues with COVID, but the athletic director thinks these pauses have been very effective in halting any major outbreaks, so that's good. The abbreviated quarantine option, we are using that in our schools, but that is not allowed for participation in sports and activities. The full quarantine is needed for the sports and activities. Spectators, currently, we're one of the few schools only allowing 2 spectators from the home team to come to sporting events. Beginning tomorrow, I would like to increase that, and I plan to increase it unless there's an objection from the board, allowing 2 people for each participant for both the home and away team. Talking to the athletic director, he feels that our facilities are large enough that they can structure safe space for that, and we can allow the visiting parents or guardians or the people of the athlete's choice to come to those events. I know our families really appreciate the ability to go to other schools and watch their children participate. The tournaments for the winter sports begin at the very end of January, and this is part of the deal here. The athletic director requested this, that it'd be nice to allow 4 spectators for each participant in order to host a WIA event. That's the requirement. We would like to start with 2 and 2 and see how that goes. Really kind of get a gauge with the safety of that. And if that goes well, I think that's something we could consider. I would much rather have our students be able to play at home and not have to travel on a bus if they earn a seat that allows them to play at home. But I do think it's something we should test with 2 and 2 first before jumping to 4 and 4 in the tournament series. We continue to receive requests for facility use, youth sports, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, community ed requests. We have held off on all those. We have not allowed any of the new requests since the school year started. The high school, I don't think we're going to be able to open up the high school like we have in previous years with the youth groups using the field house all the time. The way that they need to structure the practices and keep the different high school groups separate is one issue. Plus, there's an expanded contact day scenario for spring sports based on COVID and missing so much of the spring last year. But I do think there's some other facilities at our elementary schools and such that could be possible. I talked to KT Gallagher about that a little bit, and she agrees with me. I think allowing that immediately is probably a little premature. We're on the edge of being able to say that we did not have a holiday spike here in Dunn County, but neither one of us feel quite comfortable being far enough away from that. We only had 4 new cases in the county today, but it's very possible, kind of 3 incubation periods. It's very possible we could still see that. So what I would like to do is study it for the next 2 weeks and then bring a recommendation to the board for your consideration on January 25th in terms of opening the buildings a little bit more for community use. Are there any questions, comments, or suggestions tonight?
Jim?
Yeah, what 3 sports had to take a pause, and what, like, say for basketball, where you just got those great big long wooden bleachers up there, how do you mark off spaces to keep people separated while they're in the stands?
Okay.
How do you do that?
So the 3 sports, and I wish the athletic director was here, but one of the hockey teams had a pause, one of the lower level boys basketball teams had a pause, and the varsity girls basketball team had a pause. And then in terms of the bleachers, the new gym's beautiful. It's got nice plastic bleachers, but it's plenty big. They can use, whether it be tape or ribbon. That's something I'm sure the athletic director can do a good job of.
Chris, is that a question? No. Any other questions for Joe? Over the board. Okay, moving on, discuss the item 4C, SDMA reopening plan. And I'll defer to Charlie on this.
Well, I heard a lot of discussion, we've heard a lot of discussion over the last, sorry, usually not my problem. We've heard a lot of discussion over the last probably 6 months about the reopening plan and how it hasn't been followed. And I guess my request was that those who are continuing to say that we haven't followed it, I guess I'd like some discussion on that and let's get it out there. Where hasn't it been followed? What have we done wrong? And what do we need to do for the future to make it better?
Okay,
I'll start.
start with Amy.
I've had quite a bit of conversation with Joe about reopening the high school and some other concerns, and also in my evaluation, I kind of also said some things too. But basically, the plan I thought was good when we started it out, and I think that we had all decided that, yes, we wanted in-person learning from the beginning. And I thought it was good, but what fell down is those thresholds. And what I'm saying is not just me that thinks this. It's a very big piece of the percentage of this community, as you have well seen from all of the emails and stuff that has gone back and forth, social media, whatever. So it's not just coming from me. But I guess the part that said, he said something about if the trajectory was high and it got high, we would go to hybrid. Okay, that's the way I understood it. Okay, then if it got worse and hybrid wasn't working, then we would go to all virtual. I think those thresholds were met a couple different times, and those things were not taken care of. The other thing was, I believe that we said that we would not do sports if the high school went virtual. And it was virtual for 3-4 weeks or whatever it was, and there's still sports. So those are things that people in this community are asking. Why are we not following? Also, if you think about all the communication we had about that, we also had communication just by numbers of students that decided to take a shelter at home for the rest of the semester, 139 students. And if that was the case, you heard a lot of the things people saying they felt trapped because they signed up for this and then they felt like, oh my gosh, in person. And then between the 4 and the 6 feet, I think what happened there was, when we got to the 6 feet, I think what happened is you went ahead, which I thought was a good thing, was you were able to make it so that there could be 6 feet all the way across the high school, all schools really, but for the high school for sure, when you opened up the field house and all that kind of stuff. But proactively, I think that could have been done sooner than, instead of saying 4 feet at the beginning of the plan. And in some instances, I feel like if I had known that this was going to happen the way it did, I probably would have joined the other board member that voted no on the plan to vote no if I had known that it was going to turn out this way. That's all for me.
You had 7 seconds left, Amy.
Well done.
Anybody else? Chris?
Phone timer, huh?
Yeah.
I get the same jingle.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
I would just, Amy, that was super succinct and got at a lot of the problems that we were dealing with this semester. I think the biggest thing is that this plan is so ambiguous that it's not really a plan. The number of subjunctives and conditional statements that may change, that might change, that could change, it creates a very programmatic statement of what's going to happen according to some things that are called thresholds, but then it kind of backs out of those thresholds as being meaningful at all because of the ambiguous language that we use. So anytime you use a subjunctive or a future conditional, you're evading the way in which that there's a specific action that's going to happen. And that's what gave the people in our community confidence that we have good land. So when you take that confidence out that there are going to be guidelines that we're going to follow, or at least if we are going to change our thresholds, we'll adopt new thresholds. Well, the adoption of new thresholds never happened. And so we create an expectation that we are going to have specific guidelines, and if we don't follow these guidelines, we're going to change them so that people still have a specific guideline that they can count on. When that is taken away, it exposes the plan for what it was, which was a gesture towards what might happen. But that actually, very few of these things actually came into play in terms of the way in which people experience this return to school. Under 3 minutes.
Yeah, a minute and a half, so, thank you. Any other board members that haven't spoken? Yeah. Jim?
Yeah, just back to the thresholds, I'm looking at the section of the plan here, and, the thresholds talk about the burden and the trend. And both of those went way up pretty quickly. And then also the burden on the hospitals was also quite high. And instead of making the changes to instructional models, all of a sudden we started measuring the or started reporting and started talking about, I think you call it exclusion rates. Rather than following this, all of a sudden exclusion rates became the determining factor rather than the trends and stuff that were in the initial plan. And there was never any formal change. It just kind of all of a sudden materialized, and people were going, well, wait a minute, this is the plan and this is what we're talking about. So they really felt that it wasn't being followed at all, and things were just kind of being made up as we went. So that's my 2 pieces, my 30 seconds.
Anybody else that hasn't spoken yet? Clint?
Well, I think where a lot of the confusion or, I guess, subjectivity comes out is the thresholds. Did we or did we not exceed the thresholds that were originally set? And then, to me, it felt like we set thresholds, and then really a lot of the burden as far as what we decided to do with the school got placed on the public health director, KT Gallagher, as to whether or not it was safe to be in person or not. I don't know for a fact that we ever did really exceed the thresholds that were set. So it's kind of my 15 seconds worth, but.
I guess my understanding of the situation is we never exceeded the thresholds. The problem was we didn't have the staffing to be able to maintain all of our buildings. So our student thresholds didn't go over any limits. Neither did our staffing, but when we have a shortage of substitutes, not just in our district, but across the state wide, if we don't have teachers, we don't have classes. So I guess my understanding of it was we never met those thresholds. We had to back down so we could keep our K-8 students in person full-time, and unfortunately our high school students had to bear the brunt of it. Otherwise, we would have still been in school. And if I'm wrong, please correct me.
Tanya, you haven't spoken yet?
I'm good.
I guess what I would say is that, Chris, you talked about the plan being a little ambiguous, some of the language in there having some leeway in that, but I look back to where we were in March. We were all virtual with stuff shut down, and the plan coming back into school was the board voted. It was the board's direction that was given to Joe, that we want our kids in school. That was the intent going into it. And I will agree that, yes, some things changed, but when we talked about, especially the sports piece, the board voted on that. We voted to allow sports to continue, even though the school was in a virtual format at the high school. But I think that the way the district has adapted to things that have happened and kept our kids in school, to me, is really good. I mean, we gave a lot of the students the option to go virtual if they wanted to go virtual. And granted, we weren't able to do that everywhere, but with the additional staff that we had and the resources available, I think we did a pretty good job of keeping kids in school and allowing them to learn. And I've had more parents come up to me and thank me for the kids to have the ability to be in school. And even today, it just continues to impress me. So, okay, with that, everybody's spoken. We'll start
Just,
Charlie, we first? I'm sorry. No, you can go. Okay, Jim.
Just to clarify, Penny wanted to know if we had exceeded thresholds. And it says here, I'll just read this, if the COVID-19 burden in Dunn County reaches high level and the trend indicator is an upward arrow or hospital and reach and surge capacity, and right now I believe the burden level is very high. And I think it's level, the arrow is level, but it's very high. So we're over the top of what it says in our plan. We're actually exceeding that level right now. And we've been that way, the very high has been here for a very long time. And so, yeah, we have exceeded them. Like I said, when we started exceeding them, then all of a sudden we started dealing with the exclusion rate rather than dealing with the burden. and that was how the decisions were made. So that's where the plan, my wife's made, and the community, I think, are frustrated because they felt the plan wasn't being followed, because they looked at the exclusion greens that we talked first, or not the exclusion, but the little matrix and all of this stuff. So that's where I think the idea that the plan hasn't been followed came from. And then I think some, like, the dates changed and some other things too. People felt like they had planned and whatnot. But anyway, I think that's the main thing right there, is that this is in here, the exclusion rate was never in here, and when people looked at it and said, well, why aren't you doing it?
Okay, thanks, Jim. Anybody else? Charlie?
So, one of the things that we do know about COVID is it's uncharted waters. When this plan was written, we had no idea what was going to happen in the fall. Nobody could have predicted what happened. We knew that the cases were going to go up, but we didn't know what levels, exactly how things were going to work out. So, I really think, well, there was a lot of externalities that came into play. Things that didn't really affect our school district directly, but things that drove the case levels in Dunn County. So I think that's one of the reasons why when the burden level reached high, when you really look at it, when you look at the school-age kids, it wasn't high. And I think that was taken into account, at least I believe that it was. And, you know, the vote for this plan was 8-1, if I remember correctly. The wording, Chris, I don't believe has changed since you voted yes for it, and as did the rest of us. So if you didn't like the wording of it then, that would have been a good time to have brought that up, that, hey, I don't like, this is kind of, you know, vague, I don't like that. That would have been a good time to have brought that up. As far as the sports are concerned, we voted as a board to allow those sports to continue. In my mind, that's how this plan should be amended. If you want to amend the plan, I say you bring an amendment, or you instruct the administration to take another look at the plan, to do something about it, and then the board votes on those changes. Isn't that how it should work? Instead of month after month after month saying, I don't like this, it changed, I don't like this, it changed. If it changed, if you don't like it, then let's do something about it instead of just talking over and over and over again.
Chris? Chris, then Amy. Sorry.
I actually did bring that point up when we discussed this. I voted yes because I thought a good show of support for the plan going forward necessitated that we all voted yes for this. I caught hell for that when I got home. But as to your suggestion about making a motion to amend the plan, I think that that's a good one, but I think that's something we should have been doing, and we brought this up in December, we should have been doing over break to get some clarifying language of what's happening. I appreciate you bringing this up and adding it to the agenda now. And then when we think of how you're representing people's perceptions of the plan, I am thoroughly happy with the successful way in which that the district was able to keep our kids in school. I mean, that's what they're doing in Europe. It's working. I'm a fan of a lot of the outcomes that we have. My problem is the process. And what I was raising was issues that our constituents were presenting to us, that there was a problem with the process. And they were legitimate. And our job should not be to prove them wrong. Our job should be to listen to them and to thank them for raising these issues for us and then try to react to that. That's something we didn't do, and what we did get caught up in, as we often do in this board, is getting caught up in a question of who's right and who's wrong, rather than responding to the desires of our constituents. So, you know, a lot of things went great this semester. I think acknowledging that we should make some changes now, maybe we can put this on discussion item, and we can put people in charge of rewriting some of the language, so that it can avoid some of the ambiguities that caused problems in the last semester. Overall, and I think I expressed this to Joe, I agree with the idea that we want to keep our kids in school. But when we do that in ways that violate the process that we put forward, it causes problems for our staff and it causes problems for our community. I'm not even opposed plate. I was wrong. I thought it was going to be a big source of spreading of COVID. And I thought we should go along with the KT Gallagher's recommendation. For whatever reason, there's a lot of positive things that came out of that season. And I can't predict these things, but I can tell you that process is important. And that we have a responsibility to listen to our constituents, and we have a responsibility for amending our policy and our processes if they're not corresponding to what we say we're going to do.
10 seconds.
8.
Anybody else that hasn't spoken yet? Amy?
Okay,
Well, you have spoken twice. Anybody else that has not spoken yet? I guess the only thing, Jim, to your point, you talked about the thresholds, the extremely high part of it. The last part of that, I think, has something to do with, there's a may in there, about how we handle it, or what happens if we reach those thresholds, what the outcome is going to be because of reaching those thresholds. And I think it included, we may have to close the school down, or may have to go virtual. And I don't think it was set in stone that if we get to those thresholds, school will be shut down. I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong.
Dave actually reminded me one, because I remember asking that too, if it got to that, with trajectory and burden being high, I had asked, well, what about the fact that Doug County is a matrix of communities between Colfax, Boyceville, and UW Stout coming in, and it was a may, because if our district was not affected, our community, Menomonie was not as affected as, like, say, the Stout or Boyceville, Colfax community, there was still the option of staying open, because when I first read that, I thought it meant automatic, that if we hit those burden and trajectory numbers, which still surprised me that they're still as high as they are with, and of course, that link that you sent us was good through the 5th, and I think those numbers continue to come down as people are coming off. So yeah, just to echo what Dave said, the May was a big part of that.
Okay, people haven't spoken yet. Tanya, opinion, anything?
No, what I want to say has nothing to do with this, so.
Joe?
Well, I think we followed it very well, and we've gone through this over and over and over and over. We didn't get guidance from the state. If you look at what Minnesota had, it was very clear guidance. I've already shared with the board that, I was surprised when we reached high that the health department gave us the option to get to the 6 feet. I mean, if you remember, we started without 6 feet, and we ran into a problem with exclusions. And once more became known about where COVID was really happening in the community, especially in September. It's kind of like the Colfax thing that Clinton mentioned. It wasn't necessarily focused in our schools. And I think that was the reason that the health department said to all of us Dunn County schools, either get 6 feet or you need to look at something different. So the alternating schedule was never needed. Otherwise, we would have been. And we didn't know what enrollment was either. If enrollment would have been different with the number of kids going virtual, we would have had no choice but to do alternating enrollment in the blended learning. So I'm very proud of what the district has done. I think the number of days we've been in school is terrific. You see all over the state and frankly the country where people are on the other side of this petitioning the boards to open the schools. Even in Madison, there's been legislation circulated that would require 2/3 of a vote of the school board to close a school. At the same time, I will not hesitate to close our school if we cannot staff it or if we feel with the health department that is needed. So if this is the board's plan, and if the board wants to change the plan, I will follow whatever the board says, but until then, I think we've followed the plan quite well.
Okay, thank you. In my mind, that was a really good discussion. I had a lot of input from different board members, and respectful, and Amy?
Just to piggyback off what,
Is the board okay with continuing the discussion? Or
this is my second time.
Okay, third, sorry.
Second.
Okay. I have done with third. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let's just say that what Charlie said, Yeah, it's true, we did not know what was going to happen. But that's why the plan was in place, to be proactive, in my mind. So that when something did happen, we had a plan to go forward. Yes, the board voted on sports 3 different times. But I also think that we have Joe as a leader, and when a health director, she can't mandate, but when she says that it's not a good idea to have sports, and then we take it to the board for a vote, to me, I just think that that is kind of underwriting somebody's profession. And 3 different times, she said not to do that. Now, like Chris, I'm very surprised that the sports are going as well as they have. I think maybe you're lucky, I don't know. But I will say this, we still don't know what's going to happen in the future. But there was a study that just came out from Ohio about athletes. 30% of college athletes, and it's a small study, so don't take it for whatever, but it's a study on its site that says that 30% of student athletes that have COVID will also experience heart issues and permanent damage going forward. And so I think we need to try to remember to look at those kinds of things too. And again, we don't really know, it's still unknown. We can do so much more about it. These decisions wouldn't be so hard. But that's all I have to say.
I apologize, Amy, that was your second one. I wrote your name down to go, and then we changed.
Thank you, that's okay.
Penny, and then Joe.
You know, Amy, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Joe presented the information that he was given. He didn't make the vote, and he didn't make the decision. The board did. So to put this on his shoulders is not fair. He brought to the board of 9 the information that was provided to him, and he made the vote. In favor, against, it doesn't matter. That was on us. That was not on him. So I think that you were somewhat misrepresenting, and I hope beyond a hope the study that you referenced is incorrect or small enough of a portion that it's inaccurate. But it comes back to a point that I made many, many board meetings ago. Your student does not have to participate in athletics or FFA or DECA or musicals or band. You choose to allow them to. So it's just as much on the families as it is on the board for allowing it to happen, as it is on the health department or the governor. I mean, we can go on all different levels and angles from this. These are conscious decisions. Being in school is required in some way, shape, or form. Being involved in extracurriculars is not. And we as a board allowed it to happen, and that's where we need to move forward with that.
Joe.
Yeah, I object, Amy, to you implying that I did something wrong as a leader by bringing forward information for the board to consider and vote on. You know, we talk about listening to constituents. There was a lot of parents and kids that wanted to have sports. I mean, I received a ton of feedback on that. So I don't appreciate the implication, and I think that's wrong.
Okay, let's move on to our next agenda item. Item 4D, clerk's report on 2021 school board election. Clint?
Are you good?
Clint, would you like us to present it?
Okay, my understanding Jamie's gonna do it. I do have.
Yeah, okay, yeah, Jamie is the deputy clerk, so Jamie, why don't you do it?
Give me your mic.
Oh, here you go.
All right, so we did, the deadline was January 5th. We had to extend that through the 8th because Tricia didn't either turn in a non-candidacy form or didn't file to run, so we had to extend the period till Friday. We had 8 candidates run for school board for 3 seats, so we will go to primary election on February 16th. On Friday, after the deadline was done at 5 o'clock, Penny was a witness, and Joe and Donna Thibodeau, one of our candidates. I drew the names for ballot order, and the ballot order will be Jim Swanson, Penny Burstead, Jeremy Enger, Carl Palmer, Donna Thibodeau, Angie Skillings, Rick Charlo, and Mark Hillman. So I've got that out to the clerk, so we'll go to primary.
Nice to see a robust candidate. 8 people in the primary. And, did you want to talk at all, Joe, about the school board forum at all?
I did see a message that just came through. I'm not sure the details on it. Let me just see if I can find it real quick. There is going to be a candidate forum, a virtual candidate forum on Tuesday, February 2nd from 7 to 9, and it'll be live streamed on YouTube and Facebook. So more information will come out from the League of Women Voters on that.
Okay. Moving on, review and discuss 2021 WASB resolutions for delegate vote. Amy?
I'm your delegate. You probably all saw them if you read them. I have my packet, I read through them. If you have any certain way you want me to vote, let me know now. Or if you can't, if you want to take a look and let me know, just let me know by next week, the morning of the 20th, because that'll be the afternoon. Starting at 1:30, I'll be voting on these amendments or these resolutions.
Anybody else besides Jim and Amy attending the convention virtually, correct?
Yes.
I would like to, I'm gonna get signed up, Jamie.
Charlie, you're signed up?
Not through here.
Okay.
But, I'll
Cease. Okay. So if you have any particular questions or things that you, concerns with Amy, you can speak with her about those. So, let her know. Discuss item, I'm sorry, Jim?
I just want to say, I know it's going to be really different with the virtual format, but I suppose you want a report again like we always do on the convention? We always give a convention report.
You know, it's really up to the board.
I don't know how because I know usually we get a lot of handouts and stuff, and
Right.
I don't think we'll get those this time, so I'm not sure, just clarification, I might want more from a report after the convention's over.
How about if you get something, or there's something of value that you think might be, positive for the board?
I guess part of my thought on that is, yes, if we get something, and I would be more than happy to put together a brief synopsis, but not going to the individual sessions. I guess I feel part of the reason that it's important to give the breakdown is because usually there is a sizable cost between hotels and meals and mileage. There's no cost this year. So I would like to be able to offer a brief overview, and if there's any good handouts, which we can forward on, obviously virtually, but as far as individual breakdowns, that should be left up.
Could I suggest that we just maybe have an agenda item on the meeting after the convention, and anybody wants to share anything, instead of writing up a report? Is that sound okay?
Or they can provide those reports for that board meeting to work on?
Yeah, I can put them in the background if anybody shares anything with me, otherwise just a verbal would be fine. I think.
Perfect.
Does that sound good?
Very good. Charlie?
Perfect. I think it'll actually be easier this year to get the information to the sessions that you go to. All the people that are presenting have already been required to upload their information. I know a lot of people are doing videos and some of those kinds of things, so their presentations are already uploaded. They'll be easy to get. The flyers that you get in the exhibit hall, of course, is a different story. But to the sessions that you go to, I think that might be easier this year because it'll be there beforehand.
Amy?
I think there is a cost though. I mean, it's minimal, it's not like the whole thing. So there is still a cost, and I think we owe it to taxpayers that pay for those kinds of things, that we should share something. So I'm glad that you brought that up, that we do have, share something about what we learned. Other thing is that all of the neat thing is that remember when you go, there's like 3 sessions you want to go to, they're all at the same time, you're trying to figure out which one to go to. Well, the cool thing is they're going to be all be video recorded and will be available to us till the end, to those that are signed up to go till the end of this year. So if you want to see more than one and learn something more that you weren't able to do before, then you can.
Very nice. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'll move on to item 4F. Discuss policy 252.1, development of administrative rules. Chris?
We talked about this in the last meeting, and it was given to Jim and I to come up with a statement that could add an addendum to the policy, so we get a chance to see what that would look like. I think Clint's probably the best informed on this. I think that there was did you guys pass something on Thursday?
Yeah, AB 1 was passed. As it relates to the school districts, it actually is almost verbatim for what they've got here from language. And I can read you, I'll do that in just a minute. Of course, this is all pending what happens at the Senate or what happens with the governor as well. I know the Senate has a session tomorrow to discuss this, but I'll read you, there we go. So if you compare this to what Chris and Jim developed in AB 1 under Section 5, school board vote for virtual instruction, specify at the beginning, and this of course was passed last week, on January 11th, 2021, ending June 30th, 2022, which is the emergency declaration period, a school board may not provide virtual instruction to pupils in lieu of in-person instruction unless approved by a 2/3 votes from the members of the school board. Specify that the approval would be valid for 14 days, after which school board could extend the virtual instruction for 14 days only by a 2/3 vote of its board members. So essentially what that would do is it would allow your district administrator or your superintendent the authorization, the power to have 14 days to close the school, at which after 14 days the board would have to meet to approve for an extension of that. Similar language was put in place for the public health as well. So it gave the unelected officials like Joe or KT the power to do their jobs, but also take some of the responsibility off them if it exceeded 14 days, while also giving more community insight. So it pretty much did word for word go with what Chris had shared with us.
I think, can you repeat that with, I didn't quite, so if you're gonna close schools for 14 days,
Yeah.
we have to vote. Joe can request it and we vote on it. And then 14 days is up, then we can do it one more time.
So he
For
can,
14 more days, and we have to vote on that also. So for a total of 28 days, you could possibly go virtual, and that's it.
no.
No.
The district administrator, so like in our case, Joe could close for 14 days. After the 14 days, then the board would have to convene in order to stay in virtual.
Okay.
And then every 14-day period after that, so it's not limited to 28 days. Because I had asked that question, Jim, too, because the language is a little confusing, I'll be honest on it. So it could be extended, but every 14 days, the board has to make that decision. So you can't just go indefinitely into virtual.
Joe?
I would just say, like I said last meeting, I think this policy change is not necessary. We do have a policy for emergency school closings, which allows the district administrator to close schools when the safety or welfare of students is endangered. I don't think you want to have to come in at a moment's notice to close our school, whether we're talking about a pandemic, whether we're talking about a snow day, whether we're talking about danger situation. It's not needed. And if there's a situation like we had with the high school, the board all was informed about the decision ahead of time. We have a mechanism in place. If a board member disagrees with the administrative decision, it's very easy for a board member to call a special meeting and to have a vote by the board. I'm not looking for power on this. That's not the point. I'm looking at efficiencies and operating our district in a safe and efficient manner.
Okay. Penny?
Just a couple quick things. One, Clint, clarifying questions. This is just based on COVID-19 and the pandemic, and if I understood what you said correctly, this is only good through, what, June of 2022?
Yes.
So this is very limited. Our policy covers everything overarching, and I don't want to see us get our hands tied because, no offense, but if we're in the middle of, I live in a world of disaster. If the high school is on fire, I don't want to have to get called into a board meeting to say, oh, sorry, high school students can't show for school. I think we need to leave that leeway in the hands of whether it's Joe or any other superintendent, because that's the other thing we need to take into consideration. As we change these policies, it's not just Joe, it's any superintendent. And let's say Joe has COVID, well then Brian is second in command. We need to give the people the authority to do what they need to do. And if there's a disaster of some kind of tornado comes through Menomonie, I'm sorry, I don't have time to come to the board office and make a vote on this, nor do many other people in this room. We're busy dealing with other things. So I don't want to see us get our hands tied or tie the hands of our administrative team with these little nuances. I think that things have been handled. I don't necessarily disagree with parts of what Quinn shared, the 14-day initial time period and then a discussion, but every 14 days after that to vote is not okay. in my book.
Joe?
Well, it's important to note that even without the policy change, we still are required to operate our schools within the state statute. So if the legislature changes the requirements for school closing, we certainly would have to follow that. The whole purpose of the change to the policy here on administrative rules was to provide the flexibility needed to keep our kids safe and to keep our schools operating efficiently in unforeseen circumstances. And I really would caution the board to put restrictions in that could make it problematic to do so.
I guess I have a question of Chris. Since this was your motion or agenda item initially, what are you hoping to gain by doing this?
Yeah, this doesn't actually interfere with any district administrator's ability to implement the plan, right? So if the district administrator chooses to close the school, it doesn't interfere with that at all. It doesn't have to go through any hoops or anything like that. We just have to give approval of that. My idea in the last meeting was that we would give approval at the next board meeting. It was not a special meeting, but this is not about interfering with decision-making. This is about accountability on the part of what the board is supposed to do as a body of oversight. By not fulfilling our duty to give oversight, in this case, one of the most important decisions that are going to be made affecting our constituents and our students and our staff in the classroom, we are not fulfilling our obligation as a board. So as happened in the emergency meeting, there was no opportunity to vote up or down on whether or not it was a good idea. And it's not to say that that couldn't have happened, but this is trying to reiterate the fact that we are a body that is supposed to give oversight to the decision-making processes of the administrators. And this does not interfere. Joe, well, sometimes I wonder about the degree to which that you interject into the meetings a lot of times.
Chris, are you commenting on my performance in open session
No,
right now?
I am not.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, like, I as a board, I mean, you are here as an advisory capacity, and we are the board members. And in many ways that you participate as a board member, you're not accountable to the same rules of...
Please stay on point to what we're talking about, not...
Oh, well, I was responding to his statement. So I would say that this, well, that's what I believe I was doing, so I'll get back onto the situation. This is clearly a question of our job as a body of oversight, right, to fulfill our obligation to the people that elected this position. So it in no way interferes with Joe's responsibilities or his decisions to close and reopen schools, but we have to approve that, because that's what we're supposed to do. We are an oversight body that are supposed to oversee the processes of the district. So this seems pretty basic to me. And it's not making us go through an extra step to determine whether or not we have to conduct oversight. We actually have to conduct oversight. So I would add as an addendum to this that we would have to vote to approve the closure or the reopening at the next board meeting.
Joe?
Before I was trying to get Dave's attention, and I wanted to speak when you were done. That's all I was doing. Again, like it was mentioned last meeting though, so what happens if I make a decision to close schools And then we have this board meeting, or, we have a board meeting, and then the board votes no. So then school reopens the next day. It's not, you do provide the oversight with the policies you set. In the policy 723.2, emergency school closings, is where you provide the oversight. And certainly, the oversight is there that if I let you know ahead of time, Chris, I'm planning on closing the high school, and you disagree with that, or I'm planning to open the high school and you disagree with that, you can call a special meeting. There is nothing that would have prohibited the board from voting when we had that special meeting before. I believe you asked for a discussion item maybe, I'd have to go back and look at the agenda. But you could request an action item to have the board vote up or down. I would again caution the board to tie the hands of the district with the policy amendment that you proposed.
Clint?
Well, a couple comments, and I'm speaking as a Menomonie School District member at this point. I don't think that the changes to this policy are necessary, given what guidance will probably come out in AB1. And then the bigger thing here is, I think what we're trying to do is what really needs to be accomplished in closed session when we do the superintendent, district administrator eval. If Dr. Joe makes a decision that I don't like, as far as closing a school, or whether it's related to COVID or a snow day, or I want to second guess his actions after the fact, I think that stuff needs to be addressed when we do his evaluation, and not at each meeting following any decisions he makes as district administrator.
Okay, we haven't heard from Amy, Charlie, Tanya, or Penny? Yeah.
Trust me, I can.
Charlie. Amy, anything?
I have nothing to say.
Charlie?
My only point would be that this is ambiguous at best as to whether the vote needs to take place prior to or after the action. So regardless, that needs to be cleaned up. Because I agree with Penny, I don't feel like having a board meeting at 5:30 in the morning deciding whether or not we're going to call a school because of snow.
I guess my comment on this thing, I feel we hire a superintendent to do his job. And this here, to me, is micromanaging. I would just assume the board hire somebody to do their job and let them do their job. And if we have a problem with that, we can deal with that down the road. But I think this is micromanaging the superintendent, and I don't think we need to be there. Tanya?
Just what I said at the beginning, I still feel like the information is still misrepresented, trying to go through and figure out what kind of, content that guy gave him to on this. I can't find anything, even with the latest email that you attached from Chris's work email, can't find anything in there. So I guess I go, we got told about process. Well, I still don't see where the description of this agenda was. I don't still see any supporting documentation. So I mean, if we want to talk about process, I don't see how we're still following it. Here nor there, I don't support changing any of the verbiage in the policy whatsoever.
Chris?
This was just a charge that was given to Jim and I. There wasn't have to be any supporting documentation. We decided in the last meeting that Jim and I were going to take a charge of writing what that would look like. I didn't add the guy Levy email. I don't see how it's pertinent. So I appreciate the tenor of the discussion. I think everybody made really good points. And I think it's good that we have differences of opinions and we just move on with them. So I think that this is the point where we take a vote up or down to see if we'd like to adopt this measure as amended, which was...
No, it's only a discussion.
Should have to come back as a action agenda item.
So that would be something that we would move to now, or that it would probably be a next meeting?
Well, what's the will of the board? Do you want to bring it back or not? I sense some pretty strong arguments on each side. Does the board want to vote whether to bring it back, or?
Well, I would suggest we can bring it back as an action agenda item, and if people aren't in favor of it, they can vote it down. Or if they're in favor for it, they can vote it up.
I agree with that.
Anybody on the other side? Tanya,
straw poll, Dave, so we know whether or not to include it on the next agenda?
I feel like I'd rather do that because,
Well, that would actually violate Robert's Rules of Order because you're taking the vote on an amendment. I think the vote would be an action for something that's on a discussion item.
I'm not saying to vote on the item itself, but to ask the board if they want to bring it back, a procedural item, a procedural vote, basically. So to give Dave and I direction for setting the next agenda, not whether or not someone is voting for the policy.
I think we'll just bring it back, Joe.
Sure.
Okay, bring it back.
Okay, next item on the agenda. Review items related to next meeting dates, board committees, and reports. Our next board meeting is January 25th, 5:30 here at the SE office. Anything else? Jim?
Just a suggestion that we give Coach Topper accommodation for his award at the next meeting.
That's a great idea. I actually wrote that down when Mesa was speaking.
Oh, okay.
And the athlete as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scholars have more than athlete.
Thank you. Okay, I think we'll take a 5-minute break before we go into closed session. So, thank you, everyone.